One of them was murdered alongside his wife at his own farmhouse after a Saturday night show, and his hidden fortune was found rotting in a chimney decades later. One could barely read a cue card and it made him a star. One went from a Dallas orphanage to drug arrest to gospel fame. 57 years later, this is where all of them ended up. Buck Owens was the smiling, overall-clad co-host and Bakersfield sound pioneer whose cornfield comedy came at a heavy price. Born Alvis Edgar Owens Jr. on August 12, 1929 in Sherman, Texas, his early years were shaped by a Dust Bowl escape to the West, picking cotton and working odd jobs before finding his path. Armed with a raw electric Telecaster guitar, he forged a gritty sound that stood as a fierce alternative to Nashville's polished hits. But from 1969 to 1986, he traded some of that edge to co-host Hee Haw, cracking puns in the cornfield and answering fan mail on Ask Buck. Privately, he carried a lasting regret, admitting the goofy gig cost him his musical credibility. His personal life saw a marriage to Bonnie Owens, with whom he had 2 sons, Buddy Allen and Michael. Decades later, his road came to a close right where his music was born. After performing a final show at his beloved Crystal Palace Club in Bakersfield on March 24, 2006, he suffered a fatal heart attack just hours later on the March 25th, at the age of 76. On television, he was the bright red, white and blue jokester happy to deliver a silly punchline. In reality, he was a proud, uncompromising musician protecting a hard-won artistic identity. Roy Clark was the co-host and virtuoso guitarist whose friendly grin concealed an astonishing world-class musicianship. Born Roy Linwood Clark on April 15, 1933 in Meherrin, Virginia, he won his first National Banjo Championship at 14, earning an early Grand Ole Opry appearance. He moved effortlessly between guitar, banjo, fiddle and comedy, never reducing his virtuosity to a mere gimmick. That dedication earned him Opry membership in 1987 and a spot in the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2009. Away from the spotlight, he shared a long, quiet marriage with his wife Barbara and their children. He was an international force, taking his songs to the Soviet Union in 1976 and touring well into his 80s, before passing away from pneumonia complications in Tulsa, Oklahoma on November 15, 2018 at age 85. On television, he was the jolly pickin' and grinning host who made genius look easy. In reality, he was a relentless, sophisticated musical ambassador who spent a lifetime elevating country music on the global stage. Dave Stringbean Akeman was the banjo-playing scarecrow whose farmhouse became the scene of a tragedy Nashville would never forget. Born David Bernard Akeman on June 17, 1915 in Annville, Kentucky, he pitched semi-pro baseball and worked in the Civilian Conservation Corps before finding his calling in old-time music. On Hee Haw, his lanky frame, dropped trousers and eccentric humour made him a warmly familiar face to millions. Offstage, he shared a quiet life with his wife Estelle at their modest 3-room cottage in Ridgetop, Tennessee. Scarred by the Great Depression, they deeply distrusted banks, keeping their hard-earned cash hidden in overalls and secret spots around the farm. On Saturday night, November 10, 1973, after performing at the Grand Ole Opry, the couple returned home to find burglars waiting inside. In the brief, violent confrontation that followed, both David and Estelle were shot and killed. They were 58 years old. The thieves ransacked the house but completely missed the true hoard. In 1996, a new owner renovating the fireplace found $20,000 in mold-soaked, deteriorated bills hidden behind a chimney brick. On television, he was the lanky, good-natured scarecrow who played the banjo with a toothy grin. In reality, he was a cautious, private family man whose simple habits made him tragically vulnerable. Louis Marshall Grandpa Jones, born October 20, 1913 in Niagara, Kentucky, was the neighbour and best friend who arrived at the Akeman home on the morning of November 11, 1973, finding the laughter gone. He had learned traditional banjo in a poor rural environment, eventually bringing his loud, playful, theatrically old-fashioned grandpa persona to the Grand Ole Opry and television. But the horrifying discovery of his friends' bodies shattered that performance. The grief and lost sense of safety within his close-knit community lingered heavily, yet he accepted the public responsibility of testifying at the murder trial. He used his continued work on Hee Haw as a way to endure, raising a family and picking his banjo through the decades. In January 1998, immediately following an Opry performance, he suffered a severe stroke and died in Hermitage, Tennessee, on February 19, 1998, at the age of 84. On television, he was the boisterous, happy old-timer whose joy filled the screen. In reality, he was a heartbroken friend who chose to keep returning to the stage, carrying his quiet sorrow into the spotlight. Junior Samples was the barefoot Georgia mechanic whose trouble with cue cards became one of Hee Haw's most reliable laughs. Born Alvin Monroe. Junior Samples on August 10, 1926, in Cumming, Georgia, he left school after the 6th grade, finding hard work as a carpenter, stock car driver, and mechanic. When television came calling, his limited reading ability was treated as a brilliant performance style rather than simple mockery. As cue cards slipped through his rough hands, his genuine hesitations, stumbles, and delayed reactions became legendary, immortalized in his brief deadpan BR549 used car sketches. Off-camera, he shared a quiet life with his wife Grace Carey Bolton and their 5 children, remaining anchored to his southern roots. That life came to a sudden halt on November 13, 1983, when he suffered a massive, fatal heart attack at his home in Cumming, passing away at just 57 years old. On the screen, he was the bumbling, confused country boy who kept millions laughing at his honest mistakes. In reality, he was a devoted family man who turned a real-life limitation into a masterclass in comic timing that writers could never manufacture. Which classic Hee Haw moment still brings a smile to your face? Is it the quick-fire jokes in the cornfield, the brilliant musicianship of Pickin' and Grinnin', the glamorous Hee Haw honeys, or that melancholy chorus of "Where, oh where are you tonight?" Share your favourite memory in the comments below. We love keeping the golden age of television alive, so if you want to hear more stories about the legendary performers who shaped our favourite shows, please subscribe to join us for more classic TV deep dives. Lulu Roman was the comic heart of Hee Haw, whose life moved from a Dallas orphanage to the heights of gospel renewal. Born Louise Lulu Roman on May 6, 1946 in Dallas, Texas, she spent her childhood navigating the institutional discipline and choir training of the Buckner Baptist Children's Home. She brought that voice and a mischievous, quick-witted presence to her first Hee Haw appearances in 1972, quickly becoming a beloved comic performer. But that sudden fame collided with personal struggles, leading to drug possession arrests and her dismissal from the show in the early 1970s. Rather than let those arrests define her life, she underwent a profound conversion to Christianity, found recovery, and chose to reclaim her place in the spotlight. In 1975, she returned to the cornfield, beautifully balancing her trademark comedy with powerful gospel performances. Away from the cameras, she married John Miller, raised 2 children, and built an award-winning gospel career that earned her a Dove Award nomination. Today, she lives quietly in Dallas, continuing to share her music. On television, she was the mischievous, larger-than-life sidekick always ready with a bright smile and a quick gag. In reality, she was a resilient survivor who overcame a turbulent youth and addiction to rebuild her public identity through unwavering faith and song. Minnie Pearl was the gossip-loving country spinster whose price tag hat and booming How-dee made rural comedy look effortless, yet she possessed a remarkably sophisticated mind. Born Sarah Ophelia Colley on October 25, 1912 in Centerville, Tennessee, she was a privileged Vanderbilt-educated woman who studied home economics before stepping onto the stage. Her famous look, the cheap organza dress and the $1.98 price tag dangling from her straw hat, was a brilliant, calculated caricature. She contrasted sharply with her stage persona, acting as a highly cultured lady who understood the precise mechanics of theatrical timing. She married commercial pilot Henry Cannon in 1947, sharing a quiet, childless partnership that lasted nearly 50 years. On December 30, 1991, a devastating stroke forced her into retirement, silencing her iconic stage voice except for a single brief appearance in 1993. She died in Nashville on March 4, 1996, at age 83 from stroke-related complications. On stage, she was the unstoppable town gossip in the cheap dress, bringing a storm of laughter with every tip of her hat. In her private world, she was a disciplined intellectual artist who spent a lifetime making careful preparation look like pure spontaneity. Archie Campbell was the Cornfield County barber who could spin a classic fairy tale into a hilarious web of scrambled words like Rinda Cellar. Born April 12, 1914 in Bulls Gap, Tennessee, his journey to the cornfield began long before television. He spent decades working as a radio announcer, honing his voice and timing. As the local barber on the show, he was a master verbal performer, using spoonerisms to twist language in routines that kept audiences hanging on every syllable. Away from the studio, he shared a long marriage with his wife Martha and raised their children, later continuing his work in regional entertainment and local commercials. On August 29, 1987, in Knoxville, Tennessee, he died from a heart attack at age 73. On television, he was the bumbling barber whose tongue always seemed to get tangled up in his own words. In reality, he was a highly seasoned radio veteran whose apparent confusion was the work of a brilliant, perfectly timed performer. George Goober Lindsey was the sad-eyed comic who carried a familiar television face from Mayberry into the cornfield. Born George Lindsey on December 17, 1928 in Fairfield, Alabama, he first captured the nation's heart as the slow-witted mechanic Goober Pyle on The Andy Griffith Show. When Mayberry ended, Lindsey slid into the cornfield, wearing his trademark beanie and a melancholy grin that made him seem perpetually one thought behind the room. Behind the scenes, he shared his life with his wife, Peggy, and their children. Yet beneath the simpleton exterior lay a deeply compassionate man who spent decades travelling for the USO and raising millions for children's charities. Lindsey's long path of public service ended in Nashville, when he passed away from natural causes on May 6, 2012, at age 83. On television, Goober was the innocent, sad-eyed fool who kept audiences chuckling at his slow-moving mind. In his private life, Lindsey was a devoted advocate who used his beloved, recognizable face to reach veterans, children, and communities. The Hee Haw Honeys were the coordinated gingham glamour ensemble, whose synchronized smiles and youthful energy became one of the show's most recognizable signatures. Apart from the matching costumes and light-hearted comedy, the group served as a dynamic launchpad for distinct women who refused to be defined by a single cornfield identity. Swedish-born Gunilla Hutton, born April 23, 1950 in Gothenburg, arrived in 1975 before marrying John Baker in 1980 and departing in 1984 to pursue modelling. Houston-born Misty Rowe, born January 31, 1955, brought her petite, bright stage presence to the field starting in 1978, later marrying actor Michael Harper and transitioning to New York theatre. Born Barbie Miller in New York City on December 28, 1950, Barbie Benton entered the ensemble in 1979, balancing modelling with music like her 1985 track Midnight Ride and her marriage to James Benton. Paris, Kentucky. Native Kathy Lee Brett, born February 16, 1953, made a brief 1975 stop in the ensemble long before morning television stardom as Kathy Lee Gifford. On the screen, they were a perfectly synchronized line of country beauties bound by matching gingham glamour. In reality, they were highly independent artists who used the cornfield as a brief stepping stone toward 4 separate lives. CBS first broadcast Hee Haw on June 15, 1969, bringing the sounds and jokes of an idealized country porch into living rooms across America. The experiment was wildly successful with viewers, yet network executives grew nervous about keeping rural programming on their schedule. After the 1970 to 1971 season, CBS swept away its country-themed shows in a sudden corporate shift known as the Rural Purge, aiming to capture younger, more urban audiences, but Hee Haw refused to fade. The producers bypassed the networks entirely, launching the show into first-run syndication. From 1971 through 1993, the series reached more than 150 local television markets, preserving the cornfield, the rapid-fire musical medleys, and the signature comedic routines far past its network expiration. Reruns found a second life on RFD-TV beginning in 2008, continuing to broadcast the Pickin' and Grinning blocks through 2026. Today, the living memories of that era rest with only 5 surviving members. In 2026, Lulu Roman is 80, Gunilla Hutton is 84, Misty Rowe is 74, Barbie Benton is 76, and Kathy Lee Gifford is 73. The others have all moved on to quieter pastures. Buck Owens rests in the Owens family mausoleum at Greenlawn Southwest Mortuary and Cemetery in Bakersfield, California. David Stringbean Akeman lies at Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens in Nashville, Tennessee, and Grandpa Jones is buried at Luton United Methodist Church Cemetery in Goodlettsville. We remember Estelle Akeman too, whose life ended alongside her husband's on that tragic night. While Roy Clark, Junior Samples, Minnie Pearl, Archie Campbell, and George Lindsey lie in quiet, unspecified resting places, their memories remain bound to the show they built. The show survived because its performers possessed singular identities that outlived their original broadcast home. The cornfield is quiet now, but the real lives planted there were stranger, sadder, and braver than any punchline. As the remaining lights fade on this beloved era, we are left with the memories. Which classic Hee Haw bit still gets you? The cornfield pickin' and grinning, or where, oh where are you tonight? Tell us below. The cornfield is quiet now, but the real lives planted there were stranger, sadder, and braver than any punchline. Subscribe for more untold stories.